Hello, 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 and welcome back to Changing the Story, Kick-Ass Women in Business. It is your host, Lana Dingwall. Today, we are all in for a treat, mostly me because I get to do the interview live and ask all of the questions, but everyone is in for a treat. I'm not sure if anyone's ever heard of Mindvalley or EverCoach, but I know for me, in my journey of not only entrepreneurship, but also in exploring personal development, those two places have been really great goldmine resources for me. For that reason, I'm really looking forward to today's guest, who is a co-founder in both of those situations, Aijt Nawalkha, who, to me, his reputation precedes him, but I understand to a lot of you, you might not know who he is. So I'm going to throw it over to him to let him introduce himself a little bit further.
Thank you for that, Lana. Lana. Okay.
Yeah, you got it. You got it.
Got it. Awesome. My name is Aijt, like already mentioned, and I was born in India. I was born in a small town called Jaipur, and grew up in a household of about 23 different people, sharing space, which early on in my life motivated me to create a different life for myself, get out of the situation that I was in, and create a new situation in life. Fortunately, had a chance of many mentors, teachers, educators, coaches showing up in my life that led me to take courageous steps throughout the course of my lifetime, which eventually led me to come to a little startup several years ago called Mindvalley. It was already in progress. It was a tiny startup at that time with maybe 10 employees or something, and joined the company as an intern, went on to support the company in where it is today, became the CEO of the company. In that process, also discovered that I wanted more from that as well in life. I wanted to contribute more, do more. Also, my life had taken an interesting turn where my work was the only meaning I had left. And so I had to take a step back and really rediscover myself and take that chance and opportunity to find a new me, which led me to create EverCoach, which is the other company that you were talking about, and many other companies that I've invested in ever since and partnered up with and coached and consulted. That's really quickly of who I am. I am married to a wonderful woman who's a coach herself. She was my coach first, and we had to step out of that coaching relationship so we can have a different relationship. I have a wonderful 18-month-old that runs around, and you might hear him at any point because he might just walk into the room as he desires. So that's a little bit about me.
Oh, perfect. I like that. I kind of hope he comes in just to see. It's always fun, to see people. We see people a lot in their like work persona. And then it's really, I find like a very nice, intimate way sometimes to see those little glimpses into who a person is outside of their kind of work persona. Mm-hmm. Living with 23 people is a lot, I think, by anyone's standards. And I think, if anything, because at least at the time of this recording, with everything going on with COVID, I think people are also extremely hyper aware of the intensity of even just living with one person. So you were talking a lot about how 23 people, that was part of what motivated you to want to kind of get out of that situation. Can you maybe give us a little bit more of a background around some of the feelings associated with that? Because we obviously understand the mental aspect of wanting to get out of it, but what did that feel like potentially, like emotionally?
So when you're growing up at 23 people, and that's the only reality you've seen. So firstly, it doesn't feel weird when you're in it, right? You only know the difference of it when you look at a contrastingly different life. So the only thing that we were constantly aware of is that there's nothing like privacy, for example. Like your private space was when you were taking a shower. That's basically when you get private space, because everything else is with somebody else. Breakfast, lunch, dinner, study, play, everything is always with somebody else sleeping. You share the space, right? So you're not necessarily, so when you ask what were the feelings, it's not necessarily taxing on you because that's the only way at that point in our lives. And we were young kids, right? It was until I was 23, I think, is when I was living with 20, 23 people at any given time, depending on who's in and out of town. But that's the amount of people. But I didn't know any better. I didn't know how it could be with living with less people and what I was feeling. The only thing that I would constantly be aware of is there is no space and there is no there's no private time. And I'm an introverted person. I need quiet time. I need to step away from things to really be able to be myself again. I need to replenish that energy. And that was just not available to me at that time. So at that time, I would say mostly I was operating from, and it's hard to kind of lean into really capture the emotion of it.
Yeah.
But I would say mostly I was very driven, and because, like I mentioned previously, what happened in somewhere around when I was 14, 15 years old is when a teacher first identified some talent in me. Until then, I was tracking to be an engineer, which is like any Indian is engineer, doctor, or accountant. Basically, that's
Yeah.
what, if you want to be somebody, that's what you want to be, or at least that's the narrative that's being told.
Hmm.
And I was tracking to be an engineer, I was studying for it. But at around that time, one of my teachers in school identified and said, "Hey, listen, you could actually try and be like a news anchor or something, because you're
Mm.
really good at presenting information, and you're very engaging." And this was one of the random things you do, like in a morning assembly time. I don't know if you guys have that up there, but we have in India. So I did that a couple of times. She always appreciated, continued to tell me that I have a possibility that was beyond being an engineer, which was, of course, her challenge too, because every kid in that school was trying to become an engineer, accountant, or doctor. And then she
Yeah.
was like, this is, people are not really realizing what other things are even possible in life, right? So that opportunity kind of gave me the interest or curiosity, maybe even some level of courage to say, I could make something else of my life than what I've been told. And that
Mm.
was my first portal to really lean into the next step, or the next courageous step that I would take, which was first to quit engineering, which is a very big step for me to take, because my parents, who were already not very wealthy, had invested a lot in trying to train me for the exams that you have to take to become an engineer. So they had already invested a lot, and I had to tell them, unfortunately, I didn't want to do that, and I also didn't know what I wanted to do, which
Mm.
was even worse, I think,
Yeah.
because they were like, "What the hell's wrong with you?" But they were supportive, and so I could take that first courageous step. And ever since, I haven't stopped taking steps that feel like they are a little crazy, but it does seem exciting on the other end. So
Hmm.
if we get through, so that's been my story.
Yeah. No, thank you for sharing that too. Because I think what's, at least listening to the story, some of the things that I pick up on that are interesting is you talking about how even when you were living with all of those people, because it's all you can't really picture anything different. And the same thing occurred with even growing up. Like the only thing you're going to be like, yeah, a doctor or an engineer style thing. And so it's constantly in being in this place where you're just living your life based on what is socially acceptable and what is expected. And I know a lot of people feel that way. And a lot of people feel that way even now, like even way later into their careers or their lives, where in your situation, your parents were paying all this money and you didn't know what else you wanted to do. And so you took that courageous leap. And I know for some people now, they could have a family, they could have invested and finished that degree, be paying off the student loans, want to quit, have quit, but don't really know what it is that they want to do next.
Mhm.
And I know a lot of us do this, and we feel that pull where we want something different, but we're not always sure where it's pulling us. Would you be able to elaborate even a little bit more around wanting to quit, quitting, and like where did that lead you after that? Because obviously you ended up then in the States.
Mhm.
I'm in Canada, so you ended up in the States creating like multiple entrepreneurial companies. So what was that like pull, and what were some of the things that kind of led you along the way?
So there's one thing that I've realized about courage a little bit in the past many years, on my understanding towards this, as to what gets people to do things that don't make sense often, or
Mm.
feels like it doesn't make any sense when you're about to take that action. And that has a lot to do with you taking courageous steps. And I feel that has very much to do with us wanting a different answer and getting
Mm.
past the fear of saying, what is it that would stop me to get that different answer? So the excitement for the outcome is greater than the fear that presents itself, right? Or the understanding of the exciting opportunity that lies beyond is greater than the fear that you can feel. because you can't feel the excitement that is going to happen in the future. You can only feel the fear that's happening right now. So once somebody understands that distinction of saying there is an excitement that you can't feel, but it's probably greater than the fear, it allows them to do the one thing that is most important to find courage, which is to make a commitment towards yourself. Commitment towards that I will take a particular action. I will do something about this, right? And commitment may seem like a really, all right, I made a commitment. But if once you make the commitment, what happens, I think neurologically for you is because you've committed to something. If you are a person that honors your commitments, which most of us are, you tend to go, okay, I'm going to do something about this now, right? And because of that commitment, it pulls you into action. And once you get into action, courage is easy to come by because you're already in momentum. You are already in movement. So if you're somebody who is either transitioning, want to transition, has transitioned, and are finding uncertainty in the coming times, what you only have to remember is you, as much as you will want always to get certainty, if you can get yourself in the state of saying, I only will get the certainty for the coming days or the coming weeks, and it's actually really relevant right now. But what I am really buying into is the excitement of the uncertain future that I'm creating, and I'm the creator of that. It'll allow you to create a lot more commitment and action towards the new future that you're creating for yourself. And it has a lot of hope involved, of course, but at the same point in time, that is kind of how you create your new future. There is no other way to create the future than to say, let's create a short-term certainty that gets me into action and some level of commitment, but really buy into my long-term excitement. Because your actions are very inspired when you are doing something for long-term excitement. So me taking at that courageous step of the first time that when I was sharing that I had to quit engineering and kind of, I didn't have even the courage to be able to tell this to my parents. So I wrote a letter to my parents saying, this is why I don't want to do it. I feel like that even if I become an engineer, I'll be a really bad one and my entire life is going to be really depressing. I really don't want to do this. I don't know what I'd want to do, but I know that I don't want to do this. Right. So thanks to my supportive parents that they said, okay, fine, we're going to give you 2 years or 3 years to figure it all out because that's all the money I have. So you have to graduate in something, pick whatever, it doesn't matter, at least have a degree. So that way you've completed your education to some level and that's fine. But figure out something in the next 3 years because that's the kind, we only have that much money. Right. And we don't have money to fund your business ideas or anything like that if you have one. So with that commitment, I had a timeline, right? I had a timeline of 3 years to really figure out what do I want, which put me onto a fast track because I started trying things that otherwise I wouldn't, right? And that's where the long-term excitement drives you, even the short-term fear cripples you, right? My long-term excitement was I'll be out of this house, I'll create something of my own, I'll figure out where I want to be in 3 years from now. That got me to take really courageous steps. I was doing schooling, but at the same point in time, I did 2 part-time jobs. At the same point in time, I joined a student organization, which was doing voluntary work to promote more peace in the world, right? So I was doing these 4 or 5 things, doing 10, 12 hours every single day while I was 16, 17 years old, right? Because I wanted to, because I was so excited about the future, maybe 18 years old, 17, 18 years old, right? And that kind of really set me up into a really strong path of knowing mentors because while I was doing the part-time jobs, everybody was like, who's this kid that is coming into our different organizations every day and really delivering high quality work in really tiny tasks that we give him? Like we will tell him, make a PDF. And literally that's the kind of job I was doing sometimes, like make a document which had, this is the text I've written on a piece of paper, make a document. And suddenly they will see a beautiful document coming out of it. They're like, we were thinking you'll just type it out and print it out, but this looks like gorgeous. Why is that the case? And I was like, because I'm trying to learn how to use these pieces of software while I am, sitting on your expense, trying to make a PDF for you and get done in 5 minutes. Instead of that, I take 50 minutes, but I make something that's absolutely stunning. Right. And that kind of got a lot of attention where people started to mentor me really, really early on without, of course, asking for any money. Right. Because I was a kid anyway. So they really helped me out very early on. And that led me to create a new reality for me by the time I was out of college. By the time I was out of college, I was connected to a few media houses because of all the work that I was doing on part-time and the student organization I was a part of. That got me to know some of the founders of a media house, which is one of the top media houses in India. I went to them, said, I would love to get a job in your sales department because that was I was always excited about media and education. So I knew that I wanted to do something in those areas, one of those 2 areas. So I went in and they gave me a job. I became their top salesperson really fast, got them to invest in a tech startup that I wanted to do, bombed the startup, but that got me really excited about what I wanted to do next, which was something to do with the digital reality, because that was the time when Facebook was just starting to blow up. Right. So I was like, there has to be future in this because this is so good and this is so easy and this is so addictive. And that got me to reach out to some of my people, my friends in my student organization and say, do you know any digital companies where I'm happy to work as an intern? It doesn't matter. But I would love to learn. Like I want a company which actually trains me on how to do this better. And there was one of my ex-colleagues from that organization that introduced me to this little startup, Mindvalley. Which got me to say, hey, there's this tiny startup. These are people who were in the same student organization you were used to be a part of. There's really good working culture, and they really support their employees really learning well in the organization. So I was like, great, applied, got through it, said I will do the first year as an intern. I don't care if you pay me anything. So they paid me like a tiny stipend. But of course, my year of the work again, because I was curious, interested, courageous about things, got me really into understanding the ecosystem on what really makes a business work, what really makes a program work, what really makes a course work, what really makes technology work, got me really, really close to the founder, Vishen, that is. And we ended up starting a bunch of companies together. I built some certain companies, sold it to other companies. So in the past decade or so, I not only, of course, did all the track of Mindvalley, which is from an intern all the way to the CEO of the company, but I also built and sold many companies in the process. Eventually, when my life turned a different direction, where, like I said previously, I was very motivated with my work, but my life was pretty much work. Like there was nothing else. And so I was challenged because I couldn't find the fuel to life. I could only find the fuel to my work. And so I was like, I need to make another very, if you would think at the time, and my parents thought the same, and they've always thought about my decisions to be silly and stupid many times. They're like, why would you quit like the perfect job? You're CEO of a fast growth company. You're really tracking great progress every year of year. You're getting great success. You're getting really good name. Why the hell would you quit a job like that? It's like the dream job, right? And I was like, because I know there's more for me than even this. And that got me to step out and I said, I want to start this organization for coaches and I want to help and support other companies and mostly trying to create time for myself. So I had decided that I cannot be a person who never works. Like, I just not me. I can do it for like 4 or 5 days, but that's pretty much it. And after that, I'm exhausted of not working. So I was like, okay, I can take that break, but I need to also not bury myself in work. So I said, okay, I'll have a protocol which says, I only want to work 4 hours a day and I want to work maybe 3-4 days a week. So that's enough work to keep me stimulated, but at the same point of time, it is not exhausting me or taking away from other things that I want in life, right? Or other things I want to explore in life. And that got me to create this new way of doing work that I do now, which is I work very few hours, very few days a week, and I cram everything within that time period and I deliver still the quality results I want. Got me to start EverCoach about 5 years ago. That was when I was stepping out as CEO and stepping into creating this company. And here we are today.
And then the highlight of your career being on my podcast.
Yeah, that is true. Finally, I made it. Thank you for that.
Finally. You're welcome. You can retire now. Thank you for sharing all that. I think for me, a lot of the stuff that you were saying, there were some really great nuggets in there. And when we hear people's quote unquote story, a lot of the times, we just see them where they ended up with a really synopsis summary of what got them there. And even in your explanation, this is obviously, you don't have hours and hours and hours to explain. You still gave us a synopsis, but you gave us a lot of really great pieces that I think people fail to see when we really look at people we admire and figuring out, okay, how can we do what they do? And some of the big things that you brought up was really leaning into the possibility of what is. And that's something we talk a lot about on the podcast is if you can't fully lean into a full abundance, like everything's going to work out amazingly, I will be supported. Possibility is the in-between. And it's at least going to move you away from that scarcity fear around, if I quit this degree and like, what if I fail or I'll be a disappointment to my parents, like all of that fear associated with it. I love that you talked about, just leaning in to the possibility of what your future can look like if you decide to take that courageous step of doing something that's in alignment with who you are, even if you aren't 100% sure who you are and what it is that you're doing. And it's just leaning in and trusting and having faith that you'll figure it out. And that's what I love about the progression of your story is a lot of the times because, and I find today with the way that entrepreneurship is really hyped to the point where I find sometimes people aren't really committed to doing the work associated with creating their big dream or their big vision. They want the instant gratification, the success, the money, the fame, whatever it is. And so because of it, they can become really discouraged because they're focused on that short term. And so you kept talking about getting excited about your long-term vision. And in the recount of how you got to where so many people dream of being is just showing up and doing the work. And I'm stealing your words that I heard you say on a podcast before. So you talked about how if you want a certain position, show up and provide 3 times the value that's required for that position. And then you'll get the position, and show up and do the work before you get it. And that's essentially what you've been doing your whole career is you've been showing up, putting in 3 times the amount of work necessary to get the thing that you want. And that's how you ensure you get there. And I think that that's the brilliant piece with leaning into possibility and leaning into what can be. It's the like trust piece, law of attraction, all that kind of stuff. But with the practicality of actually showing up, checking your ego, doing the work, recognizing you need mentorship, recognizing you need growth, understanding that sometimes it isn't about getting paid a certain amount. Sometimes it's about learning a certain amount of knowledge because that's more important. So I wanted to say thank you for that because I loved your synopsis of kind of how you got to where you are.
Absolutely. I want to add something to that. And I'm leaning into one of the things that you said is a lot of entrepreneurs may start the journey and may want the results really quickly. And that's really what sometimes becomes discouraging. If there is somebody who's listening who is an entrepreneur and is feeling like that, I want to remind you of how our brains work. And even if you're not an entrepreneur, if you understand this, you'll understand why certain things are exciting and why certain things are not exciting. Our brains as human beings, period, is wired to find the easiest path out. It always wants to find the easiest path out. And that's how we have become the dominant species of the world. If you think about it, we wanted to get from one location to another location fast. So we built carts and then cars and then planes and then rockets if you wanted to go to a different planet, right? No other being is trying to figure that piece out. We are as human beings because that's just how we are. We want to find the easiest way to do things. That is what has made us a thriving set of people, right? Thriving beings on this planet. But that is also the challenge when it comes to creating something, right? Because if you're an entrepreneur, because your mind is trying to find the easiest path out of it, you're going to go and try the easiest things. You would go and copy somebody's template. You will go and copy somebody's sales letter. You will go and copy somebody's marketing angle. It never is going to work. Because copying something or finding the easiest path is, yes, what your brain wants, but that's not the outcome that the result that your client really wants. So be a coach, be a consultant, be a trainer, be an educator, whatever you are. People are not trying to say, give me the easy answer. People are trying to say, give me the right answer. And to get to the right answer, you can't take the easiest path because all of us are very unique and attract very unique audiences that engage with us. You have to find the right path. It doesn't have to be hard as well. But you don't have to fall for your mental trap of how do I get this done easy? Find the path to how do I get this done right? How do I achieve the right result with my client? How do I create the right program if I'm creating a program? How do I write the right book? And that will motivate you enough to say, even if sometimes the path is hard, you will take that path because you're not trying to say, what's the fastest way to get there? You're trying to say, what is the right way to get there? Also, what people forget is when you are doing business, if your motivation for doing business is, I can get this and then I'll be happy, it's not going to work. That's not what business is. Business is not a destination. Becoming an entrepreneur is not the end goal. If that is your end goal, think about your end goal. Your end goal is probably something else. And business is just a way of life, to be very honest. It's just a way of saying, I choose to live my life in a constant amount of uncertainty, creativity, courage, challenges, and creating something new. Like that's kind of what you're really signing up for when you are becoming an entrepreneur, or you're starting a company, you're becoming a trainer, you're becoming a coach, whatever that is. You're really signing up for all of these things. You're signing up for a very exciting life in a very different way that most people wouldn't choose. But if you're signing up because you're like, all right, I'll be an entrepreneur and then I'll make 100 grand and then that will be it. I'm sorry to inform you, when you'll make the 100 grand, if your desire won't go to make 200, you will crash and burn your own business. It just happens all the time. And it's not because of anything else, it's because anything that plateaus crashes, right? So you'll always want to grow. Then why worry and make entrepreneurship your end goal? Make the lifestyle that is associated with being an entrepreneur your end goal, and then you can be happy in the now because you can have that lifestyle today.
Yeah, and I think you were saying it with people sometimes confuse easiest and fastest. A lot of the time, if we take some time to just chill and try and figure out what is in alignment for us, what makes sense for us, what makes sense for our audience, our personality, and most importantly, our lifestyle, we're actually able to create the path of least resistance to our desired outcome. But because we want to rush through the process, we always get trapped into thinking that fastest is easiest, but often it's slow and steady is the easiest. Just when you're starting, it seems like the hardest because it seems so much longer. And my question to you then would be, you were saying, entrepreneurship, it's not the destination. It's more like the vehicle you're choosing. Your business is a vessel for you to do whatever the other things are you want to do. Is that sort of
impact you have with your business?
Yeah. Is that sort of what you feel like happened where with Mind Valley, like did Mind Valley, was that your goal, like your destination? And then you got there and were like, oh my gosh. Or was it, was that your end goal? Like, was that moment of realization for you? Or were you always aware of it? You just kind of had been finding so much meaning in work that you kind of got lost in it?
I think I got lost in it more so than anything else. I'm a very active goal setting kind of person. So it will pick any journal of mine. You will see every couple of months I have a list of new ideas that I want to pursue or things I want to do, or it's just I'm very excited about life, and so I constantly reevaluate what is my latest excitement. Not distracted, just excited. So some things would repeat and some things would be added on to my list of excitements every couple of months. And so for the longest time, one of the excitements that I had was to run a company like Mind Valley. And it was mostly not even, and this was a goal even when Mind Valley was a super tiny operation, like 15, 20 employees. I had joined as an intern. I was like, one day I'll be CEO of this company. I don't know why I said that, but I said that.
Yeah.
And 6 years later, I was the CEO of the company. So I was so excited about my work, and still I'm very excited about my work. But at that time I was so excited about my work, I didn't give any space to anything else. I was married to somebody else. I wouldn't have space for them. I wasn't giving any space to my parents, to my friends. Like they would be, but they were almost the afterthought, right? That was not the main thing. To my health, for that matter, to my learning was very much focused only towards business learning instead of life learning. So it's very focused towards, because I was loving it so much, and I didn't think that it could hurt. Right? I didn't know why it would hurt. I thought, well, if I'm successful and I'm happy and I'm passionate about what I'm doing, why would it hurt? It can. If you're not directed towards all of your passions and you're passionate only about one thing, it can eventually hurt. You will just realize it sooner or later. So I was lucky in a way that I realized it sooner than later. And so I could make a more conscious, more aware choice and say, all right, this is definitely hurting. What do I do to not have it hurt?
Okay. Yeah. It can be hard when you're doing something and it feels so good, and then the external validation you're getting from the world is keep it up. And it's, you externally, it's like, keep going. But something inside of you is like, this doesn't feel good. Like, again, it's like that little pull like that you were talking about earlier, that courage piece. And obviously the theme of your life is you listen to that pull and you do the hard things, even when other people think it doesn't make sense. ultimately the important thing is, it makes sense for you. And I think that that's something that a lot of people struggle with, is they don't trust themselves enough to know that even if everyone else thinks things are pretty okay, if they don't, and everyone thinks, well, you should be happy or you're on the right track, they sometimes don't trust themselves enough to lean into their courage. And instead they kind of stay stuck in the scarcity.
It also comes from a little bit of my childhood on why I would tend to always do things that are counter to popular opinion. So if any Indian person is listening to your podcast, they will probably relate to the words I'm going to say. And that's our mothers all the time. Like my mother, as I was growing up, the number one thing that she would always tell me is "Log kya kahenge," which basically translates as "What will people say?"
Okay.
And so that was just her constant narrative, and it built me in a way where I was like, I really don't care what people will say. The only thing I care for is what's right for me, and right for the humanity greater good. So I wouldn't do anything that hurts the greater good, but I do not care about what my uncle says, auntie says, some cousin says. It just doesn't matter to me anymore. Even friends say a lot of times, because like, I know that you are looking at the world from your lens and it may seem right or wrong, but I don't think that lens fits exactly the lens I am looking at it. I don't know if you have taken the time to really ask yourself the questions that I've asked myself about the absolute truth about life, or I don't know if your beliefs are formed as your beliefs, or they're a function of a lot of different beliefs that society imposes on you and has taught you ever since, and you've never questioned it. Then what you say is uninformed opinion. And there is a great value in informed opinion, and there is something that is called the cost of bad advice. And the cost of bad advice is way more hurtful than anything else that you can get in life. So that was what my narrative was, and I hope it inspires people to challenge when people tell certain things, including me. So if you feel somebody gives you business advice, don't just take it. Think about it, right?
Yeah.
Because a lot of times it's their lens of world, and they have not seen any better, and so they are out of context, and they will tell you things that are not true for you. They're true for them, and it's great for them. But get the education. Never take it in absolutes.
Yeah, there is no absolute truth, and we need to figure out for ourselves like what information is appropriate to us. I like what will others say. We talk about that on the podcast too. I always talk about it as I feel like a privilege that I had in having to come out as queer is that I went through that whole process of having to work through what will people say, really weighing the pros and cons, working through like the shame, the stigma, like all of this stuff, and then still arriving at the destination of being like, nope, I have to come out, even though I tried really hard not to have to. And going through that process once makes it easier to do that process over and over and over and over again. And I find for sometimes we fail to recognize that we probably have actually done something contrary to popular opinion, but we've forgotten that we've done it. And it can be even like what you were explaining, like tapping into a moment where you kind of broke through whatever the shackles were, even if it was just picking a different outfit for prom, because when you're in high school, that's really hard. But we all have these little moments of rebellion where we stood up for ourselves. And I think it's trying to remind ourselves and lean into it. So your story was really good in, I think, reminding people and reminding myself that ultimately we just have to do what feels good for us. And we have to answer that call of courage, lean into that possibility. And yeah, a life unlived is really a really sad thing.
Absolutely. And if it helps, you may want to ask ourselves also the question of saying, am I standing against everybody, or am I standing for myself? Right? Because standing against everybody may not be the right thing, right? Because who knows, they may be right, they may be wrong. But if you stood up for yourself, if you were right to you, it'll never feel bad, because you knew it was right for you. It was right for you. And that's the best you can do. That's the best example you can set. It is not the example of your action. It's the example of the action of that you stood up for yourself, and that you said, I believe this is right, and I'm going to stand behind it. And I'm going to do all I can to really, really live my absolute truth, because that's what life is really about, isn't it? Is living our absolute truths. Like, what is the meaning? What is the purpose? What is the long-term game? Is to live fully. right?
Mm-hmm.
With purpose and meaning and direction and what is right for us, like really living, right?
Mm-hmm.
And if that is the case, it's okay if it's against other people. That's not my point. My point is not to fight. My
Yeah.
point is to my point is to say this is right for me, and
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to stand by that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because the fighting part, even though you might not feel like it still ends up being for other people because you're trying to prove something versus like what you said, the leaning in. And I think if we think back to the stories you shared in living your absolute truth and doing what's right for you, it's also knowing that it's okay if you don't know what that looks like. And it's okay if you don't have clarity around answers that people, like the answers to questions that people are asking you, and all those types of things are okay. And it's just continuously just leaning into it, leaning into it, leaning into it. Because over time, the path starts to unfold. Because when we hear your story in hindsight, everything makes sense. But when you're living it out as a lived experience, it's quite messy. And you're like, I don't really know where I'm going, but I trust that I'm going the right way. And, we could talk again in 20 years from now, and you're going to have an entire other leg of your story that right now is just unfolding. And I think that's true for everyone. We just have to sometimes remind ourselves that. Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate your time and you taking the time to have this conversation. Do you have any like short final words to anyone?
The one thing that if there's anything that I've been able to recognize in my life or the life of people that have really inspired me is the reminder that you're going to be okay. And I think that's something that we forget, especially when the times are trying, when it's troubling, when things like that seem like they're not going right, is something that I fail to see. And I'm glad that now I can see most of the time, if not all the times. And so I want to remind everybody that you're going to be okay. Do what's right for you. Do what feels right, feels good, is good for humanity, and you will be okay. It feels hard when it feels hard, but you're going to be fine.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, and that having compassion for yourself is sometimes just reminding yourself you will be okay, even if you're not quite sure what that looks like. So thank you. It's as if you're really good at this and do it professionally or something.
I have no idea what you're talking about.
Yeah, I just found you off the street. Well, thank you as well to everyone listening. As always, I would love it if you shared this episode with anyone that you feel like really needs to hear it. Like it, subscribe, review it, whatever you need to do to get this in the hands of other people. And as always, I want to remind you, you are most likely doing way better than you think you are. So cut yourself some slack. Keep going, keep kicking ass, and we'll talk with you next week.